Hi everyone, it's Sam, NFTstatistics, and this is your Proof Daily NFT Countdown. A lot to talk about today. Going to dive into Blur V2. A whole bunch of updates came with that. A golden skateboard NFT sold for 135 ETH. Lots going on. Let's dive right in. Starting off with a quick market overview, but today we're not going to give you volumes because the databases Blur, Dune, as well as Flipside have not updated for the new Blur contract. So the data's all wrong. So we're not going to do that, but we are going to talk about prices, and prices were down again, small fall in the large cap index, a little bit of strength in some of the very smaller projects, the World of Women, Cool Cats, while things were very weak on other side, on Kodas, Moonbirds, VFriends, Azukis. Looking at the mid cap index, basically flat, had some strength in Nakamigos, a little bit of weakness in Alien Friends. Bored Ape Yacht Club down a little bit. I kind of wanted to flag them because you saw their lead artist, M. Figa, basically put out a video of Bored Apes kind of interacting with the game. Then he said that he was going to invite a bunch of actual Bored Apes to LA, do some testing in a smaller group before they release this to the swamp and the larger community. Thought that was kind of interesting, a little bit of something new from Bored Ape Yacht Club. In terms of art projects, not a whole lot of volume, a bunch of Chromie Squiggle sales. That was the only project that did more than 10 ETH of volume. But looking at where the other sales were, we had a Meridian for 8 ETH, an Anti-Cyclone for 5 ETH, a Life in West America for 4.25. I think this was sold twice, both into ETH bids. And then a Harvest, kind of one of those dual chromes that in the past would have sold for 8, 10 plus ETH, sold for 4 ETH. A little bit on the low end, but nice to see that nonetheless. Second thing to talk about, Blur V2, incentivized trade bidding launches, and a whole lot more. Let's get right into it. Here is the tweet from Blur saying they had 2 big updates. There were 2 big updates, and then one other thing they dropped in there that I think was relevant, but let's dive right in. The first is that trade bidding is live. For a handful of collections, you can earn points for bidding on trades. For others, you can't. Secondly, they said is that their gas has been optimized. Now, some airdrop farmers have done tens of thousands of trades, and have spent hundreds of ETH on gas. So this is actually a pretty important update from them. The couple times I've tested, gas has still been high, but likely due to other factors. They also said, and I think this is important, that season 2 basically has no end in sight, and we'll talk about that in a second. As far as the bids go, you can see here, now you see all the trades for a project, and then each one has a floor as well as a top bid. So you can actually start earning points for doing top bids, or you can just use it for what it's meant for and bid on an NFT trade that you actually want. A little bit about the dynamics here. One is that points per collection are non-dilutive. So what do they mean by that? I think a lot of farmers were worried. Now you're going to give more points for people who are bidding on trades. It's just more points that are going out there. It dilutes all the points that I've already earned. And they said, no, every collection is going to have the same amount of points as before. It's just some of them will go to collection, but it'll be less, and some of them will go to trades. So certainly that is probably a decent thing to hear. Second thing is, how do you decide how much trade bids get? It's going to be divided on 2 factors. One is the total number of NFTs in the trait, and the second is the premium that you are bidding to floor. So the ones that have more NFTs and higher premiums are the ones who, by this logic, are going to get the most points. I think that hoodies are a great example. There are more than 200 hoodies in the CryptoPunk collection, but it has a real cultural value and trades at a huge premium. So that's the type of trade where you're going to get the most points. They also put caps in because they don't want someone who owns a 1 of 1 to start bidding 1,000 ETH on that 1 of 1 and just earn points without ever selling it. I did go in and check it out. I did try it out, and I looked at CryptoPunks because that's a project I know a lot about. Went to like welding goggles, pink hair, beanie, a few of the kind of lesser known traits that actually do trade at premiums though, and put some bids in, trying to earn some points doing that. So go check out the collections that you are most familiar with. What you can see here is Machi Big Brother's bids. I just pulled him because he's been the biggest bidder of all. And you can see he shifted a lot of his bids over to the Grail traits, bidding on gold fur, 131 ETH, the gold fur apes have been trading for over 300, 400 ETH. So this is never going to get hit, but clearly we are seeing some of the people move and add a bunch of their bids to the traits as well as to the collection level. So interesting to see that. The second thing I did want to mention, I talked about gas and I talked about the trait bidding. is that they really provided no visibility for season 2's end. They actually went so far as to say that they have 3 more tech releases they want to give before they'll even think about ending season 2. And as those come out, that's when they'll provide guidance. So they didn't even provide guidance on when season 2 ends. Why was this a problem? I think a big reason is that I'm in a lot of the discords with airdrop farmers, and a lot of them had this expectation that season 2 was ending soon with some of the updates that we just saw. I think every single day that goes by, more points get emitted. So the points that airdrop farmers have farmed until now, the points that bidders have earned until now, become worth less and less. We know that the season is going to have 300 million blur released. That's something they've said already. They said it could go higher, but I think we should assume it's going to be 300 million. So every day that goes by, that's more blur points that are being released, and it makes the current ones that people have less valuable, because that farmers had hoped that the season would end very soon and they'd get their liquidity in exchange for the liquidity that they have provided to the platform. Here you have one of the largest airdrop farmers saying there was no timeline provided. The token has only gone down. The risk reward is terrible. I am out of this. Most people have lost a lot of money airdrop farming, and he ended up pulling more than 7,000 ETH from that. Did put a little bit back in, so that created a little bit of a narrative yesterday, though. It was just kind of this frustration and lack of understanding over when season 2 ends. I'd say in a big picture perspective, though, it didn't actually really impact total value locked. You can see there was a little bit of a down move, but at the end of the day, there's still $142 million locked into Blur. Most of the farmers are sticking around and continue to bid and continue to lend. My take on all of this, what's my overall view? And I've said this before, and I think I'm pretty outspoken on this idea, that I think that paying people to bid on NFTs that they actually don't want to hold is good for exit liquidity. If you have a gold for ape that you want to sell, this might be good for you, but it's not very good for holders, because you end up getting this transfer of supply from people who, are pretty comfortable holding, but will take a bid if it gets really high, to people who are going to dump NFTs basically endlessly. And I think that's what we've seen kind of in a lot of the collections, is that once the incentivized bidders get a bunch of NFTs, they dump, and then they dump to the next guy, and then they dump to the next guy, and there's really no end in sight. And that ends up making buyers a little bit afraid to step in. It ends up making sellers more likely to sell because they see all that supply that's out there, realize it's not going to get digested, and want to sell while the incentivized bids are there. So I do think it's good for incentivized liquidity. I do think it creates a headwind for floor prices. So that's my overall view on kind of how this is all moving. And I'll show a couple of charts that kind of show that. If we end up seeing that a lot of the bid pressure moves to traits as opposed to the collection floor, I think that would be a good thing. It would kind of ease some of the pressure that we've seen as everything is kind of sucked into becoming a floor NFT through the collection bidding, and spread that out a little bit, and maybe kind of ease a little bit of the incentivized bidding we're seeing at the floor. And that could possibly be something positive that we'll see. Until now, we have not seen a lot of farmers really bid up the price of traits yet, and we'll see how that evolves over time. Net, I see this largely as a neutral thing, and we're just gonna have to wait and see. But at the end of the day, I really don't think it's great for the ecosystem when people are being paid to buy stuff they don't want to hold. I think you want your transactions to be to people who want to hold them. The transaction's over, and the rest of the community, the rest of the holders, aren't sitting there waiting for more dumps to cascade lower, which I think is what would happen if we kind of put this incentivized bidding thing behind us. Here's a chart from CryptoPunks. If you look at the 9 months before CryptoPunks were put on incentivized bidding, they basically were a stable coin, traded between 60 and 65 ETH, literally for 9 months straight. Didn't have a single move, more than 10% over a 1 week period. And then when incentivized bidding launched, you got a big pump as Machi bid him higher. A bunch of sellers sold into his bids. They never got digested, and the floor went down, about 30%. One of the 3 or 4 biggest down moves that CryptoPunks have had over the past few years. And I think this really displays how that can create a headwind. Some people say that's just because there's more liquidity, and more liquidity means prices go lower. If you actually look at the full first half of the year when incentivized bidding was there, only 801 total punks traded. There were more punks that actually traded last year in the second half than in the first half of this year when this wasn't even around. I think there's just a illusion of a ton of liquidity being provided because these guys trade back and forth so much. So it really wasn't a thing where tons of captive holders suddenly got freed. I just thought that was kind of an interesting example on why I think this can create a headwind kind of over time. Last thing to talk about, let's talk about some other stuff. Let's talk about notable sales that happened both in the PFP space as well in the art space. Starting out, a golden skateboard shrine for 135 ETH. So to the one guy who is going to buy this, Pimp Capital, the one big buyer in the marketplace right now, spent 135 on these. What are the golden skateboard shrines? If you look at the definition, you can see it. It is a unredeemed golden skateboard. Each shrine can be burned to redeem the physical golden skateboard that correlates to the NFT emblem. Azuki launched these golden skateboards. Some sold as high as almost 300 ETH. I think there were 12 of them. Only 8 of them have not been burned yet. I'm not sure that exact number, but 8 have not been burned, and Pimp Capital wanted one. So congrats to him and congrats to the seller on that. A 3D glasses punk sold for 80 ETH, very low end of the range we've seen for 3D glasses. I think, again, floor prices have gone down and Grail premiums have gone down. We'll see. Exciting to see if the new Blur rules end up changing that. A couple 1-of-1 sales on Super Rare. MUSICA Universalis by Andres Zigelbo sold for 6 ETH. Cool piece here. He's had a bunch of sales kind of in that 4 to 6 ETH range. Here you can see a bunch of them. A little bit about him on his website. He says his self-description is erotic energy transmutation through inks and oils, magical realism, and Jewish mysticism. For love, I have lived for art. Interesting self-description, interesting artist. Congrats to him on that sale. And then another one I wanted to talk about, this piece called VCs of PFP Isis by Norman Harman for 2 ETH. This is a Scottish artist, I believe. Just thought it was kind of cool. It plays a little bit with the current meta. The artist has had a bunch of sales in that 1 to 2.5 ETH range. So this was towards the high end of his range. And just a little bit about him. He is one of Scotland's leading digital artists, specializing in painting, I believe digital painting, and his work has been exhibited across the UK and Europe. He's a member of the Art Collective Limited Incorporation. So nice to see that. Awesome. That is all from me today. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did enjoy the show, give us a like. Tell us what you think in the comments. Tell me where I'm wrong. Love to hear the disagreeers. Always got a lot of those. Subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that. And we'll be back tomorrow and just about every weekday with another show. Have a great day.